The teaching of the Buddha is a teaching which we say is timeless, because this teaching addresses the human being with the human predicament, the human experience. So as we are still human beings today, just as much as they were in the time of the Buddha, over 2,500 years ago, then this teaching is still very much of relevance to us. It's not a philosophy. We don't just want a philosophy with a lot of explanations. What we want is something that will fulfill our need and our thirst for peace, for happiness. Something which will give us a different way of living, a different way of being, different from what most of us are experiencing at present. Some people think that the Buddhist teaching is very pessimistic because it points to suffering as a human condition. But this is not a pessimistic view of life, it's just stating a basic human experience. Regardless of where you go, regardless of what you do, regardless of whether you are male or female, regardless of what religion you adhere to, human beings have a common predicament or a common experience. They are not truly happy. You are not truly happy. That's why you are still seeking. When a human being is truly fulfilled, truly happy, one is no longer seeking for happiness. But when we look around us, in this society, I'm sure it's much the same as in any other society, people are continually seeking, searching, striving for happiness. So obviously they have not got it as yet. You don't go looking for that which you already have. So this is what the Buddha meant. There is the human condition, not truly happy, not truly peaceful, not truly contented. And there is the common human aspiration for happiness. So he addressed this predicament, the human situation. And that's why this teaching is something of great relevance to us. It's not just a religion that we believe in. It's not just a dogma that we accept. It's not just a set of rituals that we perform. But it's of great personal importance, personal relevance. It addresses our own need, our own experience. You want to be happy. You want to be contented. You want to be peaceful. How are you going to achieve this? The fact that you are sitting here this evening indicates to me that you probably have now realized that you cannot achieve this happiness, true fulfillment, by merely acquiring more possessions, more money, more knowledge, by merely material needs. You probably have had enough opportunity to experiment with that approach. You probably have tried a variety of materialistic means to achieve happiness, and in the end still feel the frustration of not being happy, not being peaceful, not being contented, even in the midst of abundance, and sometimes even more so in the midst of abundance. One can feel one's inner emptiness, inner lack of contentment and peace and happiness. And this is when we begin to turn towards a different approach. We can say the spiritual approach. In other words, we begin to think that there must be another approach, another way to finding this fulfillment, this happiness, other than just by acquiring, achieving, gaining, having. We begin to realize that maybe this happiness that we are looking for must come from within ourselves. It must come from within our own minds. Because as long as our happiness depends on something external, something, someone, then that happiness is always very vulnerable, very uncertain. And all of us have had our fingers burned many times. So we begin to think maybe there's a different way to find happiness, the spiritual way, the inner journey. And to this end, the teaching of the Buddha encourages us. This is why so many of us find the teaching of the Buddha so refreshing, because it's pointing to the mind. It says the mind is the forerunner. It's the quality of the mind that is important, far more important than anything else. The quality of the mind determines whether you experience misery or peace. So that the Buddha was pointing to the mind. Contrary and unlike other teachings, contrary to other religious teachings or many other religious teachings, where they tend to point always to something beyond you, outside of you. Whatever name it may be given, it's something outside of you, something far away, pointing away from you, so that you will look to it out there somewhere and believe in it. The Buddha's teaching is pointing right at you. It's always pointing back at you, the mind, your mind. We say that the world is within you. The universe is within you. This is not a theoretical, philosophical statement. It's just a very pragmatic experience. What do you know? What can you know? You are the center of your universe. You are at the center of the universe. I am at the center of my universe. Through these physical bodies, with these physical senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body itself, which is a sensory organ, we receive information, we have contact with the sensory world, and this information is received by the mind and processed. There is the process of memory, process of conception, process of thought, and this is where we experience the universe. This is where we experience everything. What do you really know? What can you know? Only the information that you receive through your senses. Only that. And the mind is that which receives that information. And what it does with that information is your world. That's your world. The world is in your mind. And you create the world. You create the world over and over again. Each one of us create our worlds. With this basic information, we create a world of love, or we create a world of hate. We create a world of fear, anxiety, or we can create a world of peace. That is the mind that does that. So you can see how important the mind is. This fact became quite clear to me before I became a Buddhist. I was actually in Kuala Lumpur about 20 years ago. I left Australia about 20 years ago and was traveling through Asia. And I came through Malaysia and visited friends here in Kuala Lumpur, as well as other cities. After traveling for about 6 or 7 months, I was in Thailand. I found myself in Thailand. And as a result of many experiences that I had during my travels, I began to develop this appreciation for the importance of the mind. This became very clear to me, because even though as I traveled from one place to another place to another place, having all sorts of exciting and fantastic experiences, all different, and seeing so many different things, so many different people, so many different situations, scenic experiences, everything was always changing, because when you're traveling, you're just going from one place to another place to another place, always new, always changing. And so after about 6 or 8 months of this traveling, going to new places, it slowly began to dawn on me that regardless of where I was going, I was the one going. I was taking my mind with me, and the way I was perceiving, the way I was reacting and responding, even though the conditions were changing, that was me, my habits, my mind, the same greed, the same fear, the same cravings, the same anger and irritability. That was me. It wasn't anywhere in the place. That was from my mind. And so I began to realize how important it was to understand this mind and to train this mind, much more important than going around looking at the world out there. I should come and look at the world in here. And it was at that point that I made this decision to start meditating, because I had been to a few meditation centers in Thailand and met some Buddhist meditators, but I had not done much meditation up to this point. And then I realized I really must dedicate more time, give more time to this inner quest, inner discovery. And so I stopped traveling, decided to settle down in a Buddhist monastery. And one thing led to another, and here I am today, 19 years later. Because as I got into the meditation, as I started to practice meditation and study the teachings of the Buddha, I only developed greater interest. I only saw greater importance in this practice, that the mind was the center of the universe, and that what we are is shaped by our minds. And if we don't understand the mind and we don't train the mind will be a constant source of oppression to ourselves and others. First we make ourselves miserable and then we make others suffer. Because when the mind is miserable, it's difficult not to create suffering for others. When you're feeling angry, when you're feeling irritable, when you're feeling jealous, when you're feeling full of fear and anxiety, you tend to create suffering for people around you, for the world around you. But if we can develop a peaceful mind, a clear mind, a happy mind, of course we will be creating a much different world, a peaceful world, a happy world. And so the importance of the mind. Buddhist meditation is concerned with getting to know the mind, and the mind is a mystery to most people. When I first went to live with my teacher, Venerable Ajahn in northeast Thailand, he would always encourage us to watch the mind. Watch your mind. And you hear that, what's he talking about? What am I supposed to be watching? Where is it? Who's going to watch what? Because at first, the mind is something that we don't have any perspective. But what is the mind? What is thinking? What are your emotional states? We don't have a perspective because we never separate ourselves from these things. We are the thinking. How can I watch my thinking? I'm the thinking. How can I, when I'm angry, I'm angry. I am anger. Yes, this is the mind that is untrained. It is completely at the mercy. The mind is at the mercy of the moods, of the habits, of the conditioning. It is a victim. We are victims. First, we are victims of the conditions, the circumstances. Things can make you angry, so you are a victim of things. People can make you desire, so you are a victim. Anything that can make us do, react, has power over us. We are a victim. If I can make you angry, then I have power over you. If you can make me angry, you have power over me. So that we are the victim of many situations, because many situations, many conditions have power over our minds, over our hearts, cause us to react with desire, aversion, with fear and anxiety, bring confusion into our lives, into our minds, into our hearts. First, we are a victim. Somebody says, "You're a stupid fellow." We feel hurt, and just like they've stabbed us in the heart. We feel resentful. So we're already a victim. But then, we are also a victim of ourselves. We are a victim of our memory. We are a victim of our thoughts that we can't control and we don't understand. Immediately we bring up, the thought comes up, and we get caught in thinking, in negative thoughts. He shouldn't have called me that. What a terrible thing to say to me. What a horrible person. I'll have to do something to get back. And we think and think about it and create more and more suffering for ourselves. And we can't stop. How many times have you experienced this sense of helplessness where you can't stop? You can't stop the thinking. You can't stop the obsessive preoccupation with the past. What happened? What shouldn't have happened? And the sadness and the loss or the anger. Or the times when you can't seem to get out of this obsession with the future, the worry and the anxiety of what may happen or may not happen. We are a victim of our own minds. We are a victim of our own thoughts that are out of control. So this is the untrained mind. A victim of circumstances and a victim of one's own conditioning, one's own habits, one's own memories, one's own thoughts. This is suffering. Recognize this is suffering. But the Buddha said it is possible to free oneself from this affliction through the path of training, the Eightfold Path. One aspect of this path is the aspect of meditation, getting to know the mind, training the mind, to liberate the mind. So, through the practice of meditation, we begin to notice what the mind is, what it does. What is it, this mental world of ours? What goes on there? At first, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to separate. We don't know how to objectify anything. We are just lost in our own mental activity. There's no space for observation. But as we develop just a simple exercise, a simple meditation technique, which enables us to establish the mind in mindfulness or awareness, sati. Sati is the Pali word for mindfulness, awareness. This quality of mind is very, very important. It is the quality of mind which enables us to watch the mind or watch experience. Sati is that which objectifies. Sati is the quality of mind which makes known the object, the experience, the content of the mind. Becomes known. It becomes the object. It is like creating a space. It is like you wake up from a sleep, if you wish. You can see, you can objectify the contents of experience. You are no longer just the thinking. There is the knowing of the thinking. You are no longer just lost in the anger. There is the conscious knowing. This is anger. There is a knowing of the anger. There is no longer just the obsessive longing, but there is now the knowledge, the knowing of this desire. Sati is that which objectifies. Sati is that which makes known the contents of experience, the contents of consciousness. As we try to understand this, if you practice meditation, you will easily understand. But just thinking about it, of course, it's difficult to comprehend. But just by simply doing an exercise such as anapanasati, concentration of the breath, we put our attention on the breathing, that becomes our point of reference. The breath flowing in, the breath flowing out. As we do that, we begin to notice what the mind is doing, because the mind isn't as yet trained And so it will not stay with the breathing very easily. In actual fact, it will resist staying with the breath. So, as soon as it moves from the breathing, you will notice, oh, thinking. Now, this is what thinking is. You will see thoughts, you will see feelings, memories. Slowly you will get the feel for being mindful. Being mindful of the inhalation, mindful of the exhalation. Mindful of when thinking comes into the mind. So through a simple exercise, we can begin to understand this watching the mind. Watch the mind to see what the mind is doing. Through the watching of the mind, we get to know what is the contents of our experience. And what does your mind do during the day? You wake up in the morning, you do all sorts of things. What goes through your mind in one day? Must be fascinating. What sort of things go through your mind? How many fears? How many hopes? How many disappointments? How many irritations? What goes through that mind? How many plans? Most of us don't remember anything. Well, I don't know. Since you got up this morning, so much has happened. How much awareness was there? Very little, quite often. But through this mindfulness, we can begin to notice what goes through the mind. What is the mind doing? What is the mind processing? How is the mind reacting? We begin to get to know the mind. Very important. To get to know what you've got. If you want to train the mind, you must know what you've got there. This will bring a lot of self-understanding. Now, as we see this, of course, there is the training of the mind. Now, training of the mind in Buddhist terminology means to develop three qualities. One of them I have already spoken about, mindfulness. The other two qualities are effort and concentration. Mindfulness is that which enables us to make effort. Without mindfulness, our effort, it goes anywhere. It has no purpose. It has no direction. It's just here and there and everywhere. It's not effort, really. Effort means it's something applied for a purpose with a direction. It needs mindfulness to guide it. It is through mindfulness that we can discipline the mind in concentration. When we know what the mind is doing because we are awake, then we can teach the mind to be still, to focus. And this is very, very important. To develop mindfulness and concentration through effort is very, very important because it is power. So many people want power. Usually the power that we try to get is power over others. But unless we have power over ourselves, any other power that we get is simply corrupted. That is why we say power corrupts. Because those with power don't have power over themselves. They are under the power of greed and hatred. So, developing inner power, not the power to read someone else's mind, Not the power to make someone else do what you want them to. Not the power to be able to fly through the air. The power to go to the heaven realms or the hell realms. No. The power to direct your own mind, to control your own mind, to apply your own mind. The power to control your own thinking. The power of mind is its ability to concentrate. That is what power of mind is. The power of mind is its ability to concentrate. That is what power of mind is. Its ability to concentrate. Its ability to put attention on one thing and hold attention, sustain attention. That is what gives the mind power. If we develop this mindfulness and we develop this concentration, we will have power over our thinking, our creation, our emotions. We don't have to be either a victim of circumstances, nor do we have to be a victim of our own habits and thoughts. Through mindfulness and through concentration, we can have our own power to choose, to respond. Some of you have heard of a teacher who has passed away. His name is Rajneesh. He was very, very popular in Perth. He's never been to Perth, but he had a very large following in Perth, and of course a very much bigger one in America, and even much bigger one in India. Some people think he was enlightened. Some people think he was a charlatan, a fake. I don't really know myself. I never met him. But I've read a few books of his, some of them very inspiring. But I read one statement of his that has always stuck with me as a very important statement. It is a statement fit of a Buddha. It is a lion's roar. Whether he could do it or not, I don't know. Anybody can make a statement. Sometimes a mouse may roar like a lion, but it's not a lion. We sometimes can make statements, but we can't live those statements. But the statement is valid. He said, Rajneesh said to these people, he said, "You may be able to make me uncomfortable, but you will never be able to make me miserable." Now this is a statement which reflects the difference between the conditions, situations. They may be comfortable, uncomfortable, pleasing, not pleasing, but for a truly enlightened person, or even for a truly enlightened person, nothing has the power to make the mind miserable. But even for one who's not enlightened, for one who has just got mindfulness and concentration, still you have a great degree of freedom not to become miserable. You can choose not to become miserable. You can choose not to create mental suffering. When you have control over your own reactions, over your own thoughts, you can even have control over your emotions. People seem to think that emotions are something, they say, well, that emotions are somehow devoid of thoughts. That is not true. Emotions are constructed states of mind that begins with basic feelings and instincts, but it requires thinking, proliferation, dwelling. in order to build it into an emotional state. If you have control of thinking, yes, you can have a great degree of control over the emotions as well. An example. Fear is an emotion. Fear is an emotion. Fearful state, a state of fear. Now, how does that come about? A state of fear. That emotional state, anxiety, fear. I had a very interesting experience when I was living in Thailand, and I had been a monk for it was my 5th rains retreat. And in our tradition, the 5th year as a monk is very important, because for the first 5 years of one's life as a monk, one is under training. You live under the guidance of a teacher. You cannot go and live on your own. And after 5 years, you are more or less independent. It doesn't mean you don't have a teacher, but you can go and live on your own. You are considered to be self-reliant to some degree. And it also means that you are considered to be a monk who's made a commitment, who's made a decision. It's not something that's asked of you, but it's like expected that you've done the training, you should know now what you're doing. So during my 5th year as a monk, I began to feel, at first it was only a very subtle feeling, a nagging anxiety, sense of anxiety. And at first I wasn't sure what it was due to, but it grew, and it became quite an intense fear. Deep down I felt this fear in the solar plexus. Each day I'd feel a sense of fear, anxiety and fear. And I began to direct attention to this feeling, to this emotion. And I could see how I was creating it. I was creating this emotional state of anxiety and fear. And the way I was creating it was through this thinking. I started to think. It wasn't fully conscious at first, but it started like this. As I observed, the more I noticed what was going on. So the process was that I was approaching the end of my 5th rains. So I'd left Australia about 6 years prior to that, and that was only after I'd just finished a degree. So this thought started to creep into my mind. If I don't leave now, I don't think I'll ever be able to leave. If I leave now, I'm still young enough. I can get a job. Still can get a job, I think. And there's a lot of things in this world that I'd like to see and do. But if I don't leave now, I probably, just get older, and nobody will employ me. I'll be stuck. And then what about if when I'm old, 60 or 65, what about if I'll regret it all? What about if I'll think back and say, oh, what a fool I was. I should have left when I could have left. And so then, it wasn't like I sat down and thought these thoughts consciously all at once. It was a feeling that started to slowly crystallize. The thoughts crystallized after. But it was this nagging doubt and a fear that I may regret. In the end, I may regret it all. And maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should leave now while I can. And of course, I wasn't sure. I didn't really know. And what I really wanted was a guarantee. And there was no one to give me a guarantee. I wanted somebody to give me a guarantee. Because I asked myself, when I saw the fear and the anxiety, and I knew why it was there, because of this, well, maybe when I'm 65 I'll regret. And so I started to want a guarantee. No. And so this is fear, this is anxiety. Where does it come from? Thinking, speculating, and also thinking in a very foolish way, thinking in a very cowardly way, thinking in a way which is not open to life, thinking in a way which wants a guarantee for a particular result. I wanted somebody to give me a written, if not written, at least verbal guarantee that, yes, when you're 65 years old and you've been a monk for whatever, 42 years, then you'll be perfectly happy and you will not regret it. Signed and witnessed. That's really silly, isn't it? Who can possibly guarantee something like that? So there's this thinking creating the emotion. Fear, anxiety, emotional states. And of course, when one recognizes this and recognizes the foolishness of it, one can also change it. And that's silly. Who's going to guarantee it? I don't know what I'm going to feel like when I'm 65. How am I going to? I can't know that now. Maybe I will regret it. If I do, well, I just have to accept it. That's all. The future is unknown. You must be willing to accept that the future is unknown. The present is what you've got. Work with that. If you deal with the present properly, mindfully, with wisdom, then that's the best you can do to prepare for the future. And as soon as I changed my way of thinking, quite opened myself up to the possibility, yes, well, maybe when I'm 65 I will regret it. On the other hand, maybe I'll be very happy. And I leave the future be. It's unknown. I'm quite willing to accept both possibilities. And I stop thinking about it and get on with being mindful in the present moment. The fear ceases. The anxiety ceases. And this is true of many, many other states of mind, emotional states that we experience. If we can develop some control over our thinking through awareness and through concentration, it gives us the way to relieve so much of this self-inflicted misery. And it gives us a way of not allowing the externals to make us miserable. They may make us uncomfortable, but we don't have to allow the mind to react and create negativity. In Thailand, if you wish to insult someone, you call them a dog. I don't know why. Dogs are quite nice animals, actually. So people, most people would get very upset and angry. Somebody calls you a dog, you probably get very upset and angry. It's even worse than telling you you're stupid. So then, if somebody calls you a dog, do you have to react with anger, with hatred? In other words, do they have to have that power over your mind? Or can you have power, your own power over the mind? So Ajahn Chah, my teacher, used to say, if somebody calls you a dog, just look around and see whether you've got a tail. If you don't have a tail, I guess you're not a dog, so what's the problem? If you have got a tail, maybe there's some basis for the statement. But this is just a way of saying, well, instead of just reacting with anger in other words, allowing them to make you miserable, if you have mindfulness and concentration, you don't have to think, you don't have to dwell, you don't have to create inner misery. But it does require mindfulness and concentration. It does require this inner power to guide and direct our own thinking. This is something which is difficult to achieve to perfection, but it is something we can move towards, and we can all take one step at a time. Even one step is very good. Even a little more mindfulness, a little more concentration is already a great benefit. A little more freedom, a little more peace is already a great gain. So this is the way of mindfulness and concentration. Making effort to develop mindfulness and concentration as a way of developing a peace of mind, an independence of mind, an ability to direct our own minds and therefore direct our own lives without being victims of circumstances. And in this world there are many, many people who want to, and not only people, I mean many things that want to have power over you. Religions, politicians, advertisements. I'm not sure what the television is like in Malaysia, but if it's anything like in Australia, all they're teaching on television, every advertisement is just encouraging more greed, more greed, more greed. You need more, you need more, you must have more, more, more. Something new, something extra. You can't be happy because you haven't got this. Go out and buy it quickly. That's it. Every advertisement on television is like that. Every one of them. So people sit there and they're very concentrated. You see, when you watch television, you're very concentrated. And when the mind is very concentrated, of course, it receives deep imprints, registers deeply. So it's saying, go out and buy. And you're like a zombie, you see, because that has power over you, and then you have to go out and buy. New fashion, new toothpaste. So that there's so much there that is sort of impinging on us, controlling us, that it is very important for us to have this inner strength so as to be able to make the right choices in life and to be able to direct our lives for our own benefit and for the benefit of others. So this is why Buddhist meditation is not just an abstract system of study or philosophy. It's a very practical and necessary tool for us to achieve that which we really want to achieve: happiness, fulfillment, contentment, understanding. Meditation is just a tool that we use for getting to know the mind, training it in more mindfulness, more concentration, so as to develop power over ourselves, not the other things. They are not really central to the Buddhist teachings. All those other things are secondary. All those other things, powers about externals, secondary. The power that is necessary is the power of mindfulness and concentration for the freeing of the heart, for the relieving of the misery in the heart. Because the Buddha did say, I only teach suffering and the end of suffering. If the Buddha had only taught suffering, that would really be a negative, depressing teaching. But he taught suffering and the end of suffering. This is not depressing. This is very inspiring. There is a way to bring an end. And the purpose of teaching, the purpose of monasteries or temples All of that is just simply to facilitate, to encourage the understanding, the knowledge that will enable us to get on with the work, to actually begin to do it. And this each individual must do for oneself. But we can walk together. We can walk together, encourage each other by walking together. Walking all alone is possible, but it's a very lonely road, and it's easy to become disheartened. When we walk together, we still have to walk individually, but we walk together. We encourage each other. This is how we support each other. This is what it is to be a Kalyana Mitta, a good friend. So I offer these thoughts, share these thoughts with you this evening, in the hope that it may be of some value for your own contemplation, and primarily in the hope that it will encourage you to keep walking, keep studying, keep practicing. It's a lifetime of practice. At least one lifetime, maybe many lifetimes. So I would like to now give you some opportunity to ask questions. Please feel quite free to ask, not only with regards what I have talked about, but of course anything else that is of interest to you, or if I have talked about certain things that you find difficult to understand or even disagree with, you can certainly feel quite free to ask, and it is good to encourage discussion.